So now let's look at preparing the object that you've imported from MorphoSource. So let me just do that again. I'm going to go to File, Import, and I'll grab the other one. So your screen layout might look different than mine. So there are a couple of things that you may want to have open in Maya. So under the Windows menu, you can open a palette called the Outliner. And this shows you what you've brought into the scene. And so there's just some standard things, the different cameras in the scene. These things down here, you can just ignore them. This is the thing that we just brought in. So there's a little plus sign beside it. If we open up, we see there's a poly surface. So that's a model. Now we don't see anything here in our screen, but that's just because it's sort of off center. See, it's down here. One way to find this is if I select it here in the outliner and hit F on the keyboard, it will bring your camera to focus on that. F is for frame, so it will frame this image. So first of all, it may come in like this, black colored, which is not really good for illustration. So we can change the material on it, or we can just change the qualities of the existing material. So if you select the object and then hit Control A, it should open the attribute editor here. So this is the polysurf. I'm just going to rename this mandible. Right, and so we've got mandible shape, mandible. So don't just ignore the difference between these two things. And then it will come in with some sort of material, probably a fong, and that just indicates it's a shiny material. And you'll get this interface, and so we can change the color of it here just by sliding this up. If you click on this, you get a color picker, and you can choose any color you want. But I would recommend choosing white or a mid-gray or something like that. And if we select it again, go back to the Fong, if you go down here to specular shading, this indicates how shiny it is. So you can see as I move the camera around, it's very shiny looking, and this can be useful for understanding the form, because as the specular moves over the surface, it shows you something about the shape. However, if you want to change this, you change it here in specular shading. You can make it pure white, and changing this cosine power, you can see what's happening up here. If you make it smaller, it's going to be a bigger bright specular, and if you move it to the right, it's going to be a smaller specular. So you may want to move it down a little bit. Now it looks sort of like ceramic, right? But this could be useful. So if we select and hit W on the keyboard, you'll notice that its manipulator is not actually near the object. It's centered in the middle of the world here. So if we want to put the manipulator to move this, because this is what moves the object, but it'd be more useful if it's in the middle of the object, then we can select the object and go to Modify Center Pivot. You can see it pops down here. Sorry, made a bit of a mistake here. Before I do that, if we look in the outliner, you'll see that there's the mandible, and it's under a group. We don't really need this group, so the easiest way to get rid of it is just to select the mandible and middle mouse drag out of the group. Another way to do it is to select the group and go to Edit, Ungroup, and then you'll just be left with the mandible. That's probably actually the easiest way. So select let me just undo that. Select the parent, so the top level thing, so the mandible is underneath that. Select the top level and go to Edit, Ungroup, and then you're just left with the mandible. Its pivot point is in the wrong spot. I'm going to go to Modify Center Pivot, and now we want to move this whole object to the middle of the world. The easiest way to do this, well, there are different ways. I could just grab it and try and eyeball it to move it into place. You can also hold down the X key and middle mouse drag onto this grid, and you'll see that it will snap to these grid points, and I can put it in the middle of the world here. The other way to do it, and I'm just going to move it out, is up at the top of your window here in Maya. You can see all these things, and you should see towards the end these empty fields here with this sort of crosshair beside them. It should say absolute transform here. And if I just type 0, 0, 0 and hit enter, it's going to move it to the middle of the world, the 0, 0, 0 space. So we always talk about space in 3 dimensions. So in Maya we talk about X, Y, and Z. So X is in this direction, Y is up and down, Z is in this direction here, and you can see down at the bottom indicating that. So by typing 0, 0, 0 here, we're just zeroing it in what we call world space to the middle. And so now we have our model in the middle here, and if we look at it in the different views, so you can see down here this says my side camera, but we're sort of looking at the anterior view here. So we may want to take this thing and hit E to rotate it, and if we start to rotate it and click on the channel box tab over here, we can type in 90 to rotate Y, so it's rotating around the Y axis, the up and down axis. But now you'll see, now you'll see when I go into the front view, we're actually looking at the back of it. So we should probably, rather than 90, type 270 or negative 90. Right, so now we see sort of from an anterior view. From the side, we see the side view. I'm going to turn off my grid, pressing these buttons here. And then here we can see a top view. Turn off my grid. So that's pretty good. Now, depending on the model, you may want to manipulate this a little bit more to get it oriented the way you want. So even though this is the interior view here, actually in reality, you know, this piece would probably be more something like this, because there would be the other half. It's going to be hard to know how to do that, so you'll, depending on your piece, you'll have to do different things. The last thing you should do is to select this and go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. That just cleans up the model in some ways. And then finally, you'll notice if we look over here in the channel box, it has Translate X, Y, and Z values and rotate values. So these are all the dimensions that we've moved it around our scene. We just want to zero these out, and we do that by going to Modify, Freeze Transformation. And so now you can see everything is 0 and scale is 1, 1, 1. So that means if we happen to move this by accident and, you know, rotate it, if we just select all these values and type 0, it pops back to the middle of our world. Okay, so in another video we'll look at lighting and rendering an object like this to prepare it for illustration. Thanks.